very diverse portfolio of catheters, syringes, very
All right, everybody, welcome back. So I guess I'll try to multitask here, let people in as they appear and start talking. So what should we do first? Should we talk about the exam first? Would that be?
Yes.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? So, all right, so next, all right, so next Thursday is our exam, and it's going to be just like the midterm. Okay, so I will at 6 o'clock that day, maybe a few minutes earlier, send out the exams to everybody and the answer sheet that I would like you to use. And it's a little bit different. I've sort of refined things a little bit. So this could be a little bit a change in approach. And also I'm incorporating some suggestions that Baruch suggested that I do. So anyway, so not that I don't trust every single one of you. I do, but the issue of academic integrity has come up over and over again with the schools. So one of the things that they suggested that we do is that we include a statement and ask everyone to sign the statement saying that
Monday and Tuesday's class.
that I didn't, you know, that you didn't receive any help during the exam and all that. So being the school suggested that, that seems like a reasonable thing to do, just to ask everyone that. So obviously I know you can't take out a pen and sign it because we're doing everything virtually. So just type your name next to the statement, just saying that you concur, okay? The other thing I'm going to do, I think, wait, I'm still gonna, all right, is I'm probably gonna do different versions of the exam. And so they'll probably, so one of the things I haven't really, I'm not final on that. If I decide to go that way, there's going to be a couple of additional instructions on the exam, such as I'll just assign everybody a version, and that's the version that you will do. And at the end on the answer sheet, you'll have to obviously put down your name, which version of the test you took. Okay. I'm also changing it. In the past, I asked you to put down either T or F or true or false, whichever you prefer. I really didn't care. Except that I designed, I'm very proud of myself. I designed this, I did it myself. I designed this macro that's going to grade the exam for me. And for some strange reason, it doesn't recognize T and F. It only recognizes words like true or false. So I'm just going to ask everybody, because it'll be an enormous help to me in grading the exam, if you wouldn't mind writing the full word true or the full word false. If you forget to do it, don't worry. We'll make do over here. But I, you know, if it would be great if you can, you know, all follow the directions. And I know that not everybody has Excel. So obviously these, you know, I'm hoping that you can use the answer sheet that I send you, but if you can't, because you just don't have Excel on your computer, don't worry about it. Just answer any way you want. You know, just send me just type it on your email, you know, 1 through 40 and the answers or whatever, you know, it's not that complicated. So just going over the mechanics of the exam, it's 40 questions, all of them true or false. There's obviously no penalty for getting one wrong, so or leaving a question unanswered. So you know, it's simple. An unanswered question is a wrong answer. So why take a chance? You know, again, I'm not a statistician, never claimed to be one, but I do know that if you don't know the answer to a true false question, you pretty much have, I would say, approximately a 50% chance of getting it right. So just guess, okay? Don't leave anything blank. All right, just guess away. All right. Now, let's see, did I have anything else? I won't take questions during the exam. If you would like to write an explanation to an answer, go right ahead, write the explanation. I do look at them. I would appreciate, though, if you could keep it to a reasonable number. Every year, there's always somebody who explains all 40 answers. And you know what? I can't like deal with them. You want to know something? Most people who give an explanation get that answer right anyway. So it was really kind of just a waste of time writing down this long-winded explanation as to what your answer was. But if you could keep it to like 5 or fewer, that would be great. But if you feel the need to right away, okay? Let's see. Oh, and a question, a commonly asked thing that people always say is, like, if I'll say today's date is May 49th, true or false? Today's date is May 49th. Some people will say, well, it is May, so that part is true, but the 49th part looks false. Well, then the answer is false, right? In order to be true, the entire answer has to be true. Or the entire statement has to be true, or the entire statement, otherwise it's false, right? A semi-true thing is false. So, okay, so I've stated the obvious. All right. All right, so now the breakdown of questions on the exam. So sales and use tax, which we finished last week, that's going to be 15 questions. All right. UDITBA, that's, figuring out how to do an actual apportionment, with questions on sales. And and I'm sorry, I left out the most important thing. It's an open book test, and it only covers the second half it only covers the material that we covered since the midterm. So have the UDITBA statute, obviously, paper clipped in your book or print it out. It's available on the internet if you want to have a nice little copy right there in front of you. It's only a few pages long, and because you'll be consulting it for those questions, right? Unless you've memorized it, which would be a foolish waste of time to have memorized it. But so the UDIPTA questions, which will all obviously, I'll ask a whole bunch of questions asking you to, questions about how apportionment is done. That's 12 questions. So 15 questions, so 15 on sales and use tax, 12 on UDITBA, which is, like, I guess, like the second half of chapter 7. And then 12 questions on the unitary principle. So you remember all that. So that's the first half, or maybe the first 3/4 of chapter 7. That's probably the more complicated type of questions. So again, the way it's all spaced out, sales and use tax is 15, UDIPTA is 12, unitary is 12. Now, for those of you who are mathematicians, you said, wait a minute, that only adds up to 39. What about the 40th question? Well, we're going to do that tonight. We're going to have one question on tonight's lecture, which is the personal income tax. Okay. Oh, do I have anybody waiting? No. Good. All right. So that's the breakdown. So 12, 12, 15, 1. All right. Now, in terms of timing on the test, you'll no doubt the UDITBA questions, what I basically do is give you a very long fact pattern. And then from there comes all the questions from that fact pattern. So don't get upset that it takes, especially there's one of the questions, or one of the long stories has 22 questions associated with it. And so don't get upset like, oh my gosh, it's taking me a half an hour just to read this thing. Yeah, but then 22 questions are are based upon that. So I think you'll find the sales and use tax questions probably take 1 or 2 seconds for you to answer. That leaves a little bit more time for the other questions. So I think it's all, we will have pencils down by 8:30. All right, so 2.5 hours to do the test should be fine. Okay. So someone just asked, but they asked it a minute ago, are we having 4 hours to finish the exam like the midterm? Did we really go 4 hours on the midterm? I don't remember. But no, it's going to start at 6. Okay. Now I'm finally looking at the text. It will start at 6 and we'll be done by 8:30. And of
We were
course,
able to submit at 9 last time.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm sorry.
We went to 9 last time. Yeah, but this is, I'll be
When,
honest with you, I think this is an easier test, so I don't think it's going to take quite as long. But you
okay.
know what? If you want to go, ask me during the exam. Ask me, and I'll be sitting by the computer, so I'll be able to. I'll be watching for emails, during the test. We're not going to be on Zoom, obviously. So, by the way, that was one of the options for doing the final but it seemed ridiculous to me, was to do it on Zoom, and then so that we can randomly watch people while they were taking the exam. And I don't know, that seemed like kind of an outrageous violation of everybody's privacy. So I would never do that to anybody. Is
Professor?
anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a classmate that's waiting to come into this class right
Oh,
now.
okay. I just let him in. I think he's in. Can we? Who
Okay.
was it? Who was it? I don't have anybody else waiting. And they weren't waiting long. They were only waiting a minute or two because I keep looking at it. That's why I look distracted. I keep looking to see who's sitting in the waiting room. Can you confirm? Are they in?
Let me ask, or I can just look.
Oh, somebody else just came. All right. All right. Everybody is in, right? Everybody that was in the waiting room is now in. So for those of you who just showed up, it's great. I'm not going to repeat myself. I just went over a lot of the exam and what's on it, how the questions are broken out. But you can just check the recording on that. So I won't bore everybody by repeating what I just said. But you might want to listen to the first 5-6 minutes of the recording just to sort of catch up on what you missed, because it was fairly significant, like what the format of the exam is and what we're going to and how the breakdown of questions among the different topics. Okay, so all right, so that's that about the exam. Any questions? We'll throw it open. So it'll be 6 to 8:30, but I will entertain extensions, okay, to like 9. All right. Nobody has a question? Okay, cool. All right. Let me ask, I'll have a question for you though. So how are your other exams? Is it similar formats or another person waiting? We got them. Okay. Is it problem oriented? Is it, and how are they staging it? Is it, are they doing this spying thing?
Only one.
One? Okay.
Guess which?
Okay. Okay. I think I can guess, but I won't say it out loud. All right. So, all right. I think that's all I have on the exam. Here's the exam. See, it is all but one question has been written for it. All right. Uh-oh. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so what I think we'll do is we'll talk about personal income taxes for about an hour. And then we will segue into sort of a very quick review of the semester, okay? And hopefully you
Professor?
will, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I think there's someone in the waiting room.
Oh, there's 2 people in the waiting room. And now they're in. Can you see it? Is that how you know?
No, I just get text message.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well, that was very smart of them to do that. So, okay. Welcome, everyone. All right. Maybe I should, I can leave a message to people in the waiting room. Maybe I should tell them to call someone, and seems like too much trouble. All right. Okay. So I hope. Oh, by the way, on the exam, I think it would be very helpful in doing it. Well, again, I'm talking my own personal preference. I have difficulty looking at things on screen and commenting on them. The first thing I did when this quarantine was started was I bought a much better printer for myself because I need to print everything out. If I was taking this exam, I would be lost if I had to just like look at it on screen, especially since the first question, the big question, the 22 question section, is you need to flip back and forth, and it might be cumbersome to go back and forth between pages on the exam. So I hope you all have access to printers, and it would probably be smart to print the exam out, and then I think it would uh, speed things up a little bit, for you. Okay. All right. Okay, so I sent out chapter 6, a bunch of questions on personal income taxes, and wait, I'm sorry, I'm reading some. Oh, okay. So chapter 6, personal income taxes. So there'll be one question on this, and it's really just scratching the surface of personal income taxes. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. So I'll kind of and I'm kind of using a New York focus on this, although New York isn't really that much different from the other states. If you know New York, you can pretty much know every other state. Oh, well, except maybe New Jersey, which has its own unique system of personal income taxes. So let's go through this. So what two groups of people can be taxed as residents of a given state? And you know what? Of course, I'd given state, just write New York, okay? Because I'm giving you the New York answer. So there are two groups of people who file a resident New York tax return. People who are domiciliaries of New York. That means people who never have the mental intention of ever leaving New York. They have the mental state that they're going to be in New York. I don't know necessarily forever, but for it's what they consider to be their single home. Or it's people who have a regular place of abode in New York State, and they're present more than 183 days in New York State. So those are the two doors in. There's actually a couple more doors, but we're keeping this fairly simple. Okay, so there's two doors in to resident taxation: domiciliaries and residents. Residents are permanent place of abode and more than 183 days in the state. So you need to meet both of those two conditions, or you're a domiciliary of New York. So you could be off in out-of-state college for a few years, but you're still a domiciliary. If your intention is to return to New York, you're still a domiciliary of New York, and you're a New York resident. Okay, so that's the answer to number one. Number two, what is the key difference between the taxation of residents and non-residents? Well, it's very important. Residents are taxed on all of their income, wherever it's earned, anywhere in the world. You make money on Pluto, it's taxable in New York if you are a resident of New York or a domiciliary of New York. So you're taxed on all your income. Non-residents, on the other hand, people like me who live in New Jersey but travel into New York to go to work, and we're going to retreat to this issue because it's starting to look very, very interesting to me. But people who work in New York or who are temporarily working from their homes in New Jersey because of the COVID crisis, we pay taxes to New York only on our New York source income. For people who are employees, that's based upon the percentage of our salary that we earned while we were physically present in New York. So it's New York source income. Now there are other ways of having New York source income. If I owned an apartment building in New York and I generated rents, that would be New York source income. I would pay New York taxes on that. And there's other ways. If I had a business that was in New York, I would apportion the income in within and without New York. So so as a non-resident of New York, I only pay tax on my New York source income. Question 3. Is there an argument to be made that residents should be taxed on only be taxed on their apportioned income? And the answer to that is it's starting to look that way, that at least people, I don't really think this is going to go very far, but you may recall earlier in the semester, I talked about the Steiner case. That was a case in Utah that was questioning whether or not states could tax their residents on all of their income, even if they were earned in other countries or other planets, whether or not, what was so special about residency that makes them, that subjects residents to 100% of their taxation. And that was the conclusion of the Utah Supreme Court. And it was kind of an interesting open issue, but the US Supreme Court about 3-4 weeks ago declined to hear that case. So at least for now, it looks like the current system, oh, we got 2 people waiting. Oh, okay, we got them in. All right, welcome, latecomers. All right, so for the people who came in late, I strongly urge you to watch the beginning of the recording for tonight, because I went over some of the exam stuff, okay, the exam information that you should know about. Okay, so that, if you recall, that in the Steiner case, they were going to question whether or not a state could tax someone on 100% of their income because of residency. That the Supreme Court declined to hear it. And so at least for now, what I'm telling you remains the law, okay, in New York and elsewhere. One second, I'm making a note to myself. Okay. All right, 4. Jim was born in New York and has no intention of ever moving elsewhere. Why did I put a question mark there? That should be a period. Okay. Is Jim domiciled in New York? Well, yeah, that's probably the simplest possible definition of domicile, right? Remember, we can have many homes, we can only have one domicile, or we can have no home, but we still have a domicile, right? So if you're a homeless person living in Central Park, you have a home, you have a domicile, it's New York, right? Okay, so this is the simple case, right? There's no question. This guy is saying, it works for me, New York. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm staying here forever. This is my domicile. Okay, question 5. Jane was born in California in 1998 and lived there until January 2020, when she moved to New York City and enrolled in the graduate tax program at Baruch College. She falls so in love with the city and with her state tax class that she determines that she is never, ever going to live anywhere else. So again, now, once that mental state is formed in her mind, she has become a domiciliary of New York. So a slightly more complicated case. All right, so that's a simple case as well. All right, number 6. What if Jim decided to take a temporary work assignment in California and move there for a year in 2012 with the intention of returning to New York in 2014? Jim was renting an apartment. He lives in of his.
You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up after all this money I spent on
Now
a
you're
new
not,
Wi-Fi.
but-
Now I'm not. Okay, maybe it had to do with the fact that I was looking down. I don't know. All right. But so far, so good. We did pretty well, right? We've got a half hour into the class with the first. All right. So I'm back. All right. So wait, did I get my years here? So, okay. So he moves. I got my years all mixed up here. All right. So I guess the point I was making, he has a permanent place of abode in New York until the end of 2011. And then he moves there in 2012 with the intention of coming back in, I guess in 2013, that should be, right? In a year. Okay, so in which state is Jim domiciled in 2013 if he no longer has a New York residence? Well, since it's his intention to return to New York, he never stops being a New York domiciliary, and therefore he has to file. You would think that he has to file a New York return, right? Because he never gave up his domicile in New York. But the law takes this into consideration, and they have a special rule, but you have to be in either category A or category B in order in order to be a domiciliary but not file a tax return. And that is if you have no permanent place of abode. All right, so he did that, right? In 2012, he has no permanent place of abode in New York. He has a place of abode somewhere else. That's condition number 2. And he spends less than 30 days in New York. If he meets all 3 of those tests, he doesn't have to file as a resident in New York. Okay, so you can be domiciled but not have to file a resident return, but you have to be able to meet those 3 tests in category A, and category B is a little complex, but it's if you're in a foreign country for at least 450 days during a 548-day period, and you spend less than 90 days in New York during that period. So you know what? Don't worry about category B. So I'm sure you didn't jot all of that down, but it'll be in the answer that I post probably tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. Okay. So, all right. So let's move on. So, is it legally possible for a person to be domiciled in more than one state? Well, in theory, no. But there's all different there's different reasons why there could be a conflict over domicile, and that's basically because each state is going to determine under its own laws who's a domiciliary. And it's possible that a New York court could rule that a person is in New York, while the New Jersey court rules that the guy is a domiciliary of New Jersey. And I have career-wise participated in a number of these battles. It comes up quite often in the income tax space, but it seems this issue usually comes up a lot when a person dies and they had 6 homes, and each state wants the estate, wants to be able to apply estate taxes to the estate. So often there's a battle at that time. Okay, so let's go through number 7. Now we're going to illustrate this point. So in the movie Midnight Cowboy, I hope you've all saw that, it's a good one. In the movie Midnight Cowboy, Ratso Rizzo, played by Dustin Hoffman, resides in an abandoned building in New York. He decides to move to Miami, but he dies in transit after the bus crosses the Florida state line. At death, is he a domiciliary of Florida? Well, this is in I remember in law school we must have looked at like 5,000 different hypotheticals all along these lines, and this goes to show how complex it is. I don't know the law of Florida, but it might typically, generally speaking, even if it's your intent to move to Florida and to live out your days in Florida, you don't end your New York domicile until the new one is established, and the new one isn't established until you set foot in Florida. So because the way I set this up, the bus crossed the Florida state line and then he dies on the bus. Well, in this case, he successfully reestablished his domicile to Florida. And I remember in law school, there was this great case about this guy who was on the Lusitania and he dies after the ship is sunk, and a battle royale emerges over whether he was a domiciliary of, I think, Iowa or England. And I remember there were a lot of moving pieces in that case. And just to give you a little bit of irrelevant trivia, the law of England is that a person born in England is forever domiciled. He can move to the United States, become a U.S. citizen, live here in the United States for 5,000 years. He's still considered under English law to be a domiciliary of England, hence the expression, once an Englishman, always an Englishman. So that's where that expression got started. I just thought I would, not part of the course, just wanted to sort of fill you in. All right. So those are some of the complicating factors that come into it. So So what are some of the New York indicia of domicile? Because this is an issue that comes up all the time. Particularly, I had one this year, so I'll unfairly brand an entire group of people. This comes up all the time with these hedge fund managers, where because they're all billionaires, and if you become a billionaire, it seems like you have a complete adversity to paying taxes anywhere. You sort of, I'm a billionaire, I'm a special person, and therefore I don't have to pay taxes. That seems to be their very interesting attitude. And the hedge fund industry, for the most part, is basically headquartered in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, mostly Connecticut, sort of around Greenwich, Connecticut. And those are all, I guess, what you would consider to be high tax states. So the hedge fund industry has sort of slowly been moving down to what's a state that doesn't have an income tax? Well, Florida. All right, great example. So they've been slowly migrating down to Florida, or people with big businesses, they suddenly announce that they've moved to Florida, and they're not going to pay New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut taxes ever again, right? They've moved themselves, and you know, and you want to know something? If they move their entire company and they move their families, that would be great. That would be believable. But all too often, the wife doesn't want to move. The kids, I think even more importantly than that, the kids don't want to move. Very hard to uproot children. Kids don't want to move. And they try to finesse things, and they say, "Oh, you know what? I'll go to Florida, and but I'll leave the kids behind." And when they'll come out during the summer. Although, why would you want to be in Florida during the summer? And they try to finesse things. They try to argue that they're domiciled in Florida and the rest of the family is up here. And so naturally a battle breaks out. And these are the kinds of battles that, trust me, you don't want to be involved in, but it happens. And so questions come up, well, where do you vote? Well, I'll be honest with you, that one's of lesser importance, because people think, hey, I moved to Florida and I changed my vote. I enrolled as a Florida voter, so therefore I'm a domiciliary of Florida. Yeah, if only. Other questions: where is your main house? Where do you work? Where is your spouse living? Where are your children living and going to school? What clubs do you belong to? So like here they're talking about country clubs, suggesting the narrowness of the social class that they're concerned about here. So what country clubs does the person belong to? And then here's always the kicker. This one's always important. Where is your near and dear stuff? So the near and dear stuff is, of course, the penmanship award that you won in the 3rd grade, and all various things. I think I have drawers full of this stuff. I have like every birthday card the kids ever got me. So I have like 10,000 cards downstairs and things like that. And of course, if I moved, I would take all that stuff with me. My wife says I've taken over the house with all my clutter and junk and stuff. If you actually, I can give you sort of a vision. If you're wondering what kind of clutter I'm living in, this might give you some sense. This is our dining room, but I've taken it over. It's become my new working space. So yeah, so I'm not the neatest person.
It's your house.
But it's my house. Yeah, thank you, Auntie. So anyway, it's all your near and so all of that comes there. There are certain people won't be separated from all of their favorite pictures, their favorite stuff, and that becomes usually a huge bone of contention. And I only gave you A through G, but there's I think on the official list of domicile creating events it's more like a list of about 30 different things. So and well, it's obviously it's a subjective type of thing. You go down all of these things, but the real killers in my mind are, where is the big house? There are people who claim they've got a small vacation condo in Florida and a mansion in New York, and they claim that no, they're really living in Florida. So I think the size of the house is important, but really, where is your wife? Where are the children? And these types of things, it's always the wife and it's always the kids. That one's critical. If you're going to try to make an argument that your kids and wife are in one state, and I don't mean to be sexist, your spouse and your children are in one state and you're in another state, that I think that's you're going to have an uphill battle on that one, unless you can show that there's some sort of marital there's like a bad marriage in place, in which case, obviously they wanted to get 1,000 miles apart from each other. That's always the uncomfortable question I'm always left asking people when these situations come up, is when the guy is explaining he's 3,000 miles away, and then he's arguing that he's not domiciled back east, but his wife and kids are here. I always ask the guy, I said, look, this is a painful question. I'm sorry I have to ask it, but are you separated or planning on separating from your wife? No, we've been married 90 years. We're like the couple. Everybody loves us. I said, well, that's great, but it's bad. It's a bad tax answer, but I'm really happy for you that you have that. This is what's going on in your life. Okay. Oh, I will tell you that one time, hopefully I didn't repeat. I'm not repeating this story. I tend to repeat them sometimes. This was funny. I had a guy in my office. I was explaining all of this to him, and he was telling me what a great marriage he had. And he goes, well, I'll divorce my wife. I said, I'm sorry, come again? I go, yeah, we'll divorce, and then, it's okay. She'll go along with it. And I was like so surprised by this reaction. Like, you would go through a phony divorce just to win a tax matter. And I'm thinking two things. One, I doubt very much that your wife is really going to go along with this plan. And then number two, and unfortunately, sometimes you're so shocked by an answer. It took me like 5 minutes to actually say this to the guy, but I thought about it, and I said, excuse me, I don't think I can represent you. You're planning to do a phony divorce? I can't be associated with somebody who would engage in behavior like that. So he left in a huff. But anyway, but that was really the right answer. You can't. I think I told you, resist the temptation to lie. Okay. All right. Number 10. Can a husband and a wife, or a wife and a husband, can they have separate domiciles? And the answer to that is yes, but you better have a great story behind it. Like you're both partners, like in major law firms, and one is on the West Coast and the other's on the East Coast, and you only meet the only time you ever meet is in Chicago in the middle on weekends. I think maybe if you had a fact pattern and you didn't have children, I think maybe if you had a fact pattern like that, you could successfully argue that the husband and the wife have different domiciles. But I don't take that case on contingency. It's going to be tough to win. All right. And of course, if there's marital discord, then of course, yeah, then you could be in separate states. Okay, number 11. Under New York law, under what conditions can the state tax a non-domiciliary as a resident? Well, we've already mentioned this. It's the permanent place of abode plus you're present in New York more than 183 days. But I have to write something down here. Sorry, just making some notes to myself. So yeah, so if you have so what is a permanent place of abode? Well, doesn't have to be a house. It could be you've leased an apartment, that you have a lease on an apartment. You could be living with a roommate or with a friend. All of those things would count. You don't actually have to be paying it. You could be living there gratis because you have a great friend that allows you to stay there. All of those things would be a permanent place of abode. And then there's some tricky law here dealing with these people who just stay in hotels all the time. But obviously a short-term hotel is not a permanent place of abode, but a long-term hotel arrangement can be a permanent place of abode. But that's getting into, there's always minutia in any particular subject. All right, so number 12. Is it legally possible for a person to be a resident of more than one state in the same year and pay taxes on all of their income in more than one state? Yes, and it happens quite a lot, especially in the tri-state area, where people sometimes have a house in New Jersey and they have the pied-à-terre, the apartment in New York just for fun, and they work in New York, and now all of a sudden they're no longer a non-resident of New York and a resident of New Jersey. They're a resident of New York and they're a resident of New Jersey at the same time. Now, now this is significant, these two declassifications, because typically a resident state will only give a credit for non-resident taxes paid somewhere else. So if a person, so let's take me, okay? So I pay $50,000 of New York taxes, and then my New Jersey taxes end up being $51,000. Well, I don't pay 51 to New Jersey. I only pay 1,000 because I get a $50,000 credit, right? So my New York non-resident tax is credited against my New Jersey resident tax. Now, it's not quite as smooth as I'm making it out to be, because New Jersey has its own little crazy system. New York is like the federal, so it's a system with itemized deductions, whereas New Jersey doesn't allow deductions. They only tax you on your gross income. So it's not the most easily comparable to systems. So the credit doesn't work out quite as neatly as I'm making it sound. But just to give you a little peculiarity, though, of New Jersey taxes, and this is a conversation I've been having over the last few days with the New Jersey tax commissioner, is that, and this is, I think, unique to New Jersey. If let's say you're accidentally trip into residency, or you purposefully become a resident, you're a resident in New York and you pay resident tax in New York because you got the apartment, plus you're there more than 183 days, and you also are living in New Jersey, so you're a resident now of both states. Most states would not credit the New York taxes, the New York resident tax, against the New Jersey resident tax. But New Jersey does. And that's creating a huge problem for New Jersey right now, which I'll sort of get to, I'll come back to that right at the end of at the end of these questions, okay? So, all right, so what am I up to? All right, so 12, yes, it happens all the time. When people have more than 2 homes, they want to be certain that they're not present more than 183 days in the second state. All right, number 13, George and Martha live in Greenwich, Connecticut in a 4-bedroom house and rent a small apartment in New York City, which they use for weekend getaways in the city. George commutes daily to a New York City-based bank and is present in New York City 200 days a year. Is George a resident of New York State? Is George a resident of, I wrote here, of New York City. Why did I limit it that way? All right, I'm gonna change the answer. I'm gonna change the premise of my question. Is he a resident of New York State? The answer is yes, right? Permanent, here more than 183 days, and has the permanent place of abode. Even if he doesn't use it, he has access to it, right? And he's also a resident of New York City. Now, this is important because New York City has its own income tax, right? And it's actually a very high income tax for a city, right? The New York State income tax is about 7-8%, and the New York City income tax is about 3-4%, somewhere in that range. New York State has a non-resident tax. New York City does not have a non-resident tax. They used to, but they ended it about 20 years ago. Now, the second part of the question, so George would be a resident of both New York State and New York City. Now, continuing the question, Martha works in Connecticut and is in New York 100 days a year. Is she a resident of New York? And the answer would be no, because she doesn't have the days in New York. So this is how it happens, right? This is the setup for where people start paying residency taxes in more than one jurisdiction. Okay, number 14. Would your answer change to the previous question if the apartment was sublet to another person for the entire year? And the answer would be yes, it would change, because now George and Martha don't have a regular place of abode. Don't have a permanent place of abode in New York. Because it's occupied by somebody else, right? They've leased all rights of occupancy to someone else. So while they own it, they don't have access to actually go sleep in it. So they don't have the permanent place, all right? So now they're not a resident of New York State or New York City. Okay, 15. Changing the facts of number 12. Say George made sure to limit his New York days to 182. Say he's one short, but then traveled through New York on December 31st on the Cross Bronx Expressway to get to a Giants game in New Jersey. So no people from Greenwich do not attend Jets games. Is George, despite his careful planning, a New York resident in this year? The answer is yes. In counting the days, if you're in New York for a nanosecond, that counts as a day in New York. We don't prorate parts of days. Once you're in New York for a second, you're in New York for that day. So he would have messed up his planning just by traveling through the state in order to get a minute. So a minute counts for purposes of the 183-day test. So number 16, so you're thinking, all right, who's going to know, right? That's basically the premise of question 16. How do you think the state and city go about proving these things? Like, how would they know that somebody just drove through New York on that one day? They know. All right, it used to be 20 years ago, they didn't know. You could get away with that, right? There was no way of knowing that a person traveled through the state. These days, they know where you are all the time, right? Because there's so many, during these audits, they ask to see your credit cards. How many times do you go through a whole day without using your credit cards? They ask to see your cell phone records. They ask to see your Easy Pass. So if you want to pull off a scam like this, don't have credit cards, don't have Easy Pass, and throw away your cell phone, burn it, okay? So, and of course, I've see all these interesting situations where people give their cell phone to somebody else and tell them, here, don't, or they leave their cell phone home, so they think that the day in New York doesn't count, but then they get betrayed by their credit cards. So we have a couple people in our office, this is all they do. God bless them, because I can't stand it. I can't get anywhere near this type of an audit, but this is what they do. And I don't know, there's like little tricks that they know, but basically this is what a residence audit is all about. You wouldn't wish this on your worst enemy, a resident audit. Okay. Well, maybe your worst enemy. All right, so what am I up to? All right, number 18. Joe has a rent-stabilized apartment, $200 a month rent in Brooklyn Heights, and works for Goldman Sachs in Lower Manhattan. He also owns a $1 million home in the Hamptons. I guess I should have made that a $5 million home in the Hamptons. We don't want him living in the little hovel out there. All right, how might New York City react if Joe claimed he commuted in every day from the Hamptons and he had no apartment in the city? So what this guy is trying to do is he's trying to avoid not the state income tax, right? He's clearly a domicile and a resident of New York. I'm sorry, yeah?
What about 17?
Arthur, you had a question? Did I skip 17?
I think so.
All right, I'll go back to 17. Don't worry. You're right. I did skip 17. But you know what? I'm nicely into 18. Okay. So my question here is, he's clearly a resident of New York State, right? There's no denying that. He lives in New York State, right out in the Hamptons. but what he's trying to avoid is New York City taxes, right? The New York, the 4% New York's, actually it's I think closer to 5% New York City income tax. So this was a big deal about, it was a while ago, like 20 years ago, where all of a sudden New York City realized that all of the Wall Street people were claiming that the non-residency in New York City, they did some sort of a quick study, like, and they, you know, it's very easy to do these things like with zip codes, and they found out like 20,000 people, right, were claiming to commute from the Hamptons every single day, which, you know, the Hamptons like about, I'm guessing, it's about 100 miles away from New York City, so that's a hell of a commute, and it seemed unrealistic that somebody would travel that far. So then somebody came up with the smart idea of cross-checking this list of people with the rent stabilization list in New York City. Now, I don't think it's as big a deal these days as it used to be, because I think, but it used to be that it was a great thing to have a rent stabilized apartment in New York. I remember I had one back in the 1980s, and I was paying like $400 a month rent when probably the going rate was probably $800-900 a month. And so it's a nice thing to have a stabilized apartment, and you know, the rent can only go up a certain percentage each year. And then I don't know if it's still around, but there used to be rent control, and like if you were in the same apartment since like the 1940s, your rent can never go up. So there were a certain group of people, I don't know, they're probably all dead by now, but there were certain people in New York that had rent controlled apartments, and they were paying, you know, back in the 1980s, they were paying $6 a month rent, you know, and it couldn't go, by law, it couldn't go up. So obviously it was a great thing to have a rent stabilized apartment. But the thing is that in order to have one, it had to be your primary place, right? So the city dealt with these people in an interesting way. They found out they had the apartment, so that, guess what? You're a resident of New York City. You have to pay all of these back taxes for the last 10 years. You know, fork this all up. Oh, and get out of that apartment, because if you're really living in the Hamptons, then you're not entitled to a stabilized apartment. So they got even with these people, you know, by charging them all their back taxes, big interest, big penalties, and they lost their apartment to boot. So that was that one was interesting. Okay, so that was all right. So I'll go back to 17 now. So changing the facts of 12. Say George and Martha, instead of having an apartment in the city, have a vacation home in the Catskills. Used it on the weekends. Is George a resident of New York State? Yes, clearly. But is he a resident of New York City? No, right? He's residing in some place. His apartment is in New York State, or his abode is in New York State, but not New York City. So one is not, they're not, you don't automatically pay both. There are separate residency tests and separate domicile tests for the state and the city. Okay, number 19. Am I getting close? I'll pick this up a little bit. So number 19, Abe and Mary are domiciled in Illinois. Abe works as an attorney handling large cases in several states. Can Illinois tax him on all of his taxable income from his law practice, regardless of where it is earned? And well, I guess we already went over this, right? A resident state can tax you on all of your income, even though the courts are starting to question this, whether or not this is a violation of the Commerce Clause. But okay, so, but number 20, during the year, Abe handles a big case in Ohio. Can Ohio tax Abe on his Ohio source income? Well, yes, right? Just the way New York taxes me on my New York source income. So the answer is yes. Can Illinois tax Abe from a real estate investment in Florida? Well, yes, because they can tax him on his worldwide income. 22, is Illinois required to credit non-resident tax Abe pays to Ohio? Well, this bears some consideration here. The short answer is that just about all of the states have always given a credit for non-resident taxes. But as you recall, earlier this semester, we talked about the Wynn case. And in Wynn, remember there was a guy living in Maryland, and he was working somewhere else, maybe in Virginia. And Maryland had a state tax, and they were giving him the credit of the Virginia tax against the Maryland state tax. But in Maryland, there was an additional 1% tax that went to your town, and they weren't offsetting that tax with the non-resident tax from Virginia. And that's when the Supreme Court ruled that the resident state must give a credit for the non-resident tax. Otherwise, they were going to declare it to be unconstitutional. Remember, and that was a complicated case. I don't want to go through Wynn, but you'll remember that was the case where Ginsburg and Scalia both were in dissent. So you figure the two smartest people on the court said no. They probably, and Wynn has created nothing but difficulties since it was passed a couple of years ago. But anyway, so I would say based upon Wynn that a state's income tax is going to be declared unconstitutional if they don't give the credit for the non-resident taxes paid in other states. Okay. So 22 is I would say after the Wynn case, it's required. Okay, 23. Jones is an employee of X Corporation, works in the X office in New York City. Jones is a resident of New York. Jones is sent to a client's office in New Jersey for 3 weeks on X company business. Does Jones have New Jersey source income? Is he required to file a New Jersey non-resident tax return in this year? The answer is yes. You go to New Jersey for 3 weeks, you're going to have to pay New Jersey non-resident taxes. If you go for a day, do you have to pay? In theory, yes, but in practicality, no one is going to chase you down for a day. At our firm, when we do our time report every week, we have to say where we worked each of our hours. So I'll say which date I was in. And I think the cutoff is once you spend more than 10 days in a particular state, they start withholding tax for that local state. And the expectation, of course, is that you will then file a non-resident return in that state. Which is why when I do my time report and I spend a couple of days somewhere, I don't usually, well, I just encourage you not, you can always lie on your own account, just don't lie for anybody else, okay? So, all right. So for an employee, days spent in another state is what's going to create a non-resident taxable obligation for the person. But now little question A. Jones is an outfielder for the New York Mets. And this was an actual case for Cleon Jones. In addition to playing 81 games in New York, he also plays 81 games in other cities. Does he have to file non-resident tax returns in all of these states? Answer, yes. In fact, there are special rules in every state that actually hosts a professional, sort of a major league professional team, like a football team, a major league baseball team, a major league football team, or a basketball team, or a hockey team. They all have rules making sure that not only do they hold the athletes responsible for paying the local tax, but they make sure that the teams have to withhold on the player's salary. So that's always, I have had the misfortune of doing work for several sports teams in my career. Those are basically, after the hedge fund people who are pretty difficult to deal with, I would say sports teams and athletes are the second most difficult group of people to deal with. And that's the answer. There's actually a rich body of law now, requiring the athletes to pay, because they make pretty high salaries. It's worth it for the states to come up with special rules, just taxing them. All right, 24. Did I skip anything? No. Okay. Okay, 24. In 2016, Korman is an instructor at the City University of New York, teaching A graduate level course. Corman resides in New Jersey. The course meets one night a week on Thursdays. But do Corman's efforts end there? No. Much of the work is performed on New Jersey transit trains, hurtling back and forth between New York and New Jersey. Corman also works at home, generally watching the Mets and the Knicks. Yes, he's crazy. As he works diligently on interesting stuff for the class. Of course, he will file a New York resident return this year. But in recognition of the fact that so much of the coursework is performed in New Jersey, should his W-2 wages be allocated between New York and New Jersey? And I'm sorry, I somehow inadvertently made this 2 questions, so let's just move into 25. So, what's the problem? Well, imagine, hold on, little typo here. So what's the problem? Well, imagine the following colloquy between Bill and a certain next-door neighbor as they both sit in their yards. Hey, Corman, you working on that college stuff again? Yo, Chris, I hear you're running for president. Ever think you should exercise and lose a little weight, like maybe 6,000 pounds? I'm sorry, that was important to my story. Next week, a certified letter arrives from the New Jersey Division of Taxation, and sure enough, New Jersey claims that 50% of Corman's CUNY income was earned in New Jersey and will credit only half of the New York taxes against his New Jersey taxes. And could that happen? The answer is yes. They could. They could, in theory. They will only. Other than the fact that New Jersey's got this little problem with its credit statute, which I'm going to get to in the very next question. A state can impact. I really should have framed it the other way around, because this happens a lot with New York. So let's say it was flipped around. If New York got wind that he wasn't performing, that the non-resident tax, that he was overstating the amount of non-resident tax to New Jersey, New York would not give a full credit for those taxes that were paid, right? So analysis have to be done. If truth be told, if I'm doing the Baruch work both in New York and in New Jersey, it's really not, strictly speaking, all New York source income. Okay, so even though Baruch just withholds all New York salary, right, from my pay. Okay, so that can be a tricky issue as well. Actually, before I go on to the last one, there was something else I wanted to mention, which is now. Oh, so going back to the example of a couple of questions ago of the person just spending 3 weeks in New Jersey, does he have to, pay New Jersey taxes for that period? And I said yes, but again, now the thought is, well, yeah, but how do they catch you if you only spend 3-4 days in New Jersey? How are they going to catch you? Well, New Jersey, being a clever bunch of people in their division of taxation, they decided to get out the tax returns of all New York lawyers. And they saw who was filing obviously the lawyers who lived in New Jersey filed New Jersey returns. The ones that lived in New York didn't file New Jersey returns and worked in. And then what they checked that against was when an out-of-state attorney, so let's say I'm an attorney in New York, and then I go represent somebody in a case in New Jersey. Well, and let's say I'm not a member of the New Jersey bar. In other words, I didn't sit for the New Jersey bar exam. But you're an experienced attorney in New York. They're not going to turn you away. What you do in front of the judge is I ask for, it's called pro hac vice. I'm not a New Jersey attorney, Your Honor, but I asked to be admitted for this one day pro hac vice. And they'll ask, are you an experienced attorney? Yes, I've been doing this for 30 years. Okay, fine, good enough. You're fine. You can represent your client. So over the course of any given year, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of these pro hac vice things filed, right? And they're only filed if you're in person in a New Jersey court. So then New York approached all these New York attorneys and said, you didn't file a return. And they go, yeah, because I wasn't in New Jersey. Really? Then why did you file a pro hac vice motion in Morris County Court and, for 6 days. Why did you do that? How could you? Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, well, do you feel like you should file a return now? So now keep in mind, these people are attorneys, and you can get disbarred for not filing all of your tax returns. That's one of the things that will get you fired from EY if you don't file your tax. Every year you sign a statement. Yes, I filed my tax returns. And I filed all my tax returns. Same thing. And this was very embarrassing because all of the big white shoe law firms in New York had people that were appearing in New Jersey, filed motions to be admitted, and then didn't file tax returns. So they were obviously lying. They caught them in the lie. And gosh, one thing we do have is a huge law firm practice. And we had to amend hundreds of returns. It was insane what we had to do to get through this problem. And I think New Jersey regretted even starting it because how much of these, at the end of the day, they created all this tumult and they embarrassed everybody, and maybe they collected $2 million. It wasn't like this huge money grab. So it was kind of like a waste of everybody's time. But anyway, so yes, go ahead.
I think there's someone in the waiting room.
Oh, there's 2 people in the waiting room. Now there's yet one more. No matter what I do, I can't get this guy in. I'm sorry, I can't get this guy in. Oh, I think he's joining. Okay. So let's go on to the last. No, he's not. He's still. Oh, you shouldn't have come late, All right. Well, there's somebody. All right. So. All right. So let's go on to 26. And this is. So how current is this? We're talking about like today on this one. Okay. I'll fill you in on where things are going. So 26. Because of the COVID-19 epidemic, EY closes its offices in New York City, obeying the order of the governor. Korman, an employee of EY, now works from his home in New Jersey. As of May 8th, 2020, it does not look like that office is reopening anytime soon. Should he continue to pay New York non-resident tax? What are his New York risks if he stops paying his tax? What are his New Jersey risks if he continues to pay New York taxes? So this is a very real issue. So you would think that once I started working at home in New Jersey every day, not only for EY, but for Baruch, you would think that I should change and start telling New Jersey that I'm paying that I'm working in New Jersey, and therefore it's improper for me to pay New York taxes, and maybe I have an issue with New Jersey later on, right? So, except that New Jersey immediately passed a law saying that they won't attempt to tax people who are only temporarily in New Jersey. And there was precedent for this. After 9/11 in 2001, and like much of Lower Manhattan had to relocate to New Jersey, those people didn't have to pay New Jersey taxes, right? They gave them a holiday from it. They weren't required to pay. And I think after some of the hurricanes we had, there were similar situations. New Jersey said they weren't going to assert tax. Now, all of a sudden, there's some regrets. in Trenton over this largesse, right? That they were basically deferring to New York. They're saying, hey, Korma, keep paying New York taxes. We'll credit it against your tax. Except that, and here I won't get into, well, I'll get a little bit into it. It's starting to look as if certain people will probably never make it back to our New York office because of, and I think that's not just true. It's not just because of us. It's, you know, I think it's all the big accounting firms and probably a lot of companies. A couple of things are going on simultaneously. Because of the need to keep distancing between people, we just can't cram a lot of people into a building. In fact, like our elevators, if we're going to be limited, the only way our building works is if you get like 50 people in the elevator at the same time. If it's going to be 2 people, it'll take all day. By the time you got up to your office, it would be time to go home. So, so that's not going to work. So it would appear that only small numbers of people will be invited back. And besides, it seems to be working out quite well. Some people like working from home. Some people, also companies are realizing they could save a lot of money on rent by having people work from home. And now that I figured out how to make the Zoom work pretty efficiently, I should, you know, what the heck, you know, let's do things from home. We all, you know, so companies are thinking, well, we'll save a lot of money. So people are never going back. So I was talking to the Jersey Tax Commissioner and I was saying, you know, you gave this big, I should point out, New Jersey's fiscal position right now is looking pretty hopeless. I think tax collections last month were down like 60%. And they weren't in great shape to begin with. And now all of a sudden, I think the state is looking at about a $10 billion hole in their collection. And that's pretty serious because the entire budget of New Jersey is actually is nothing compared to New York or even New York City. It's like half of New York City. So the state only collects like 50 billion rather. So to be 10 short is a gigantic hole. So I was sort of discussing this out with him. I was saying, you know, you guys were really you were way too generous with, you know, with New York, and he got, you know, and hold on, you know, I know the rule that you established that you would credit New York taxes even though people were here temporarily, but this is starting to look permanent for a lot of people. Like for example, because I'm virtually certain at this point that I will never be back in our New York office because one, I'm retiring soon, and secondly, because I'm in a certain age. I become a high risk person, so it would I wouldn't even want to go in, and it's unlikely that they would even force me in. So it's starting to look pretty permanent. So it's not temporary. And I said, you know, there must be, you know, I'm not just big deal. What are my taxes? But compared to your needs, but there must be like 100,000 people in the same situation. Maybe you should start collecting, you know, and you know, we were talking that a little bit, and yeah, there would be some significant issues. I'm not quite sure how. He was asking me for ideas on how the state might go about this, but I think this. At the end of the day, this is more of a political question that the two governors are going to have to work out amongst themselves. I mean, I can come up with the most perfect plan in the world, but if the governors don't want to do it, you know, for one reason or another, it's not going to happen. So, but anyway, I just thought I would explain what's going on in my life right now. So this is an interesting tangle that the states are involved in. And of course, if all us New Jersey people stop paying New York tax, what's going to happen to New York? That New York State, New York City, they're going to be in a gigantic hole. So anyway, so that's it. That's all I have to say on personal income taxes. I'm going to ask one question on this subject next week. So for newcomers who just came in the last couple of minutes, I would urge you, to review the tape, okay, for for the first hour. A lot of good stuff that we went over, all right, especially particular to the exam. Okay. Andy, I just got your email. Okay, but you're in. So, all right. So, all right. So that's it for personal income taxes. So let's talk about the exam. Well, we already talked about the exam, the true false, 6 to 8:30. Maybe we'll extend it, open book. All right. So we went through all that already. So let's go through the subjects that are on the exam. And if you want, we could spend like an hour on this if you want. And if you have questions, we can sort of so go through it. So the test is on chapter 7 and 8 and this little bit of chapter 6 that we did tonight. You're not responsible for reading any of chapter 6. No, we're just going to go over the Q&A, and I'll probably pick out a relatively easy question, on personal taxes, right? So, all right, so let's go back to chapter 7. So the first thing that we covered in 7 was the unitary business principle, which is this sort of amorphous concept relating to apportionment, that in order for a state to apply an apportionment formula, you have to have a unitary business in place. So what is a unitary business? Well, no one has ever really defined it very well, but there's certain indicia to a unitary business, such as centralized management, unity of operations, and economies of scale. So that's basically the criteria for. Now, do you have to have all three? No. Do you have to have 2 out of the 3? Not really. These are just, if one of these indicia is met, it becomes a judgment call as to whether or not you have a unitary business. Now, how often does a question of whether or not a unitary business is in place, how often does it come up? Every day, pretty much. If you're going to work in state taxes, it comes up every day. At least once a day. It comes up in so many different contexts that it's impossible really to do a tax return for any sizable entity without asking questions. Gee, is this one business? Is this one unitary business, or 2, or 3, or 4? And how should how do we tax it? So and we gave some examples. Clearly, it's hard for me to I'm going to ask questions about this, but they're going to be fairly obvious situations, not requiring some real excruciating inquiry into it. Of course, in real life, everything is excruciating and complicated, but on our exams, at least, we'll have more extreme examples. So if we have a company that's in banking and they own a company that makes shoelaces, I dare say you would start off with the attitude that those are not unitary businesses, right? That one is not mutually supportive of the other. There aren't any real economies of scale between banking and shoelaces, and there's probably no unity of operations. There might be centralized management, but what does that really amount to? So that's the unitary business model. And why is it important? Well, and this goes, I always explained everything in terms of pies. And someone stole my idea, because the other day I was reading something where someone kept referring to the pies. So someone stole my idea, but a unitary business is a pizza, right? It's a pizza pie, and if it's in 7 states, that's what the 7 states are gonna take that, that rolling cutting thing, and they're gonna cut up that pie. If you have 2 unitary businesses, then you have 2 pizzas, which have to be separately divided, right, into slices. So they each get apportioned separately. As Justice Brennan said, the linchpin of apportionment is the existence of a unitary business. Had they been smart, they would never have come up with this stupid idea in the first place, but they did. We're stuck with it, and this is an important constitutional principle. So I think we discussed the consequences of having a unitary business. So again, it's the number of unitary businesses is the number of pies that you have. A vertically integrated business is a unitary business. So what's a vertically integrated business? Well, you may recall we looked at the Exxon case and we looked at the Mobil case. Remember, those were integrated oil companies, and they tried to argue in those cases. In each case, each time, they were trying to argue that the company was involved in 5 different businesses. One was exploring for oil, the other was refining oil, and then finally they sold oil at local gas stations. And of course, that's the part of the business that made the least amount of money. And in Wisconsin, Exxon filed a return. They said, hey, we got 3 different pies. Exploration, where we make a shitload of money, that's a pie. For refinery, we make a lot of money, that's a pie. And sell at gas stations, that's a different pie. One has something to do with the other. So they said when they did their Wisconsin return, they only split up the gas station pie. So Wisconsin only got a small profit from the least profitable segment of their business. And of course, they win their case, Wisconsin. They argue, hey, this isn't one unitary, this isn't 3 unitary, this is one unitary business, because, hey, come on, you're all in the gas business together. I understand that you're in different aspects of the gas business, but they needed to prove their point. What did they do? They looked at the intercompany transactions. Exploration sold almost all of its output to refining, and then what did refining do with its gas? It sold it to the gas station division, or passed it along to the gas station division. So basically, you had a vertically integrated business that will always be a single pie. On the other hand, a horizontally arranged business is going to be multiple pies. So, for example, General Electric is a horizontally organized business. They probably have 100 different businesses. They probably all file their own returns in 50 states, because they're all so different. One division is making jet engines, the next division is making televisions, the next one's making refrigerators, and they can point to a lack of economy of scale among these divisions. They're all in their own unique operations. And Berkshire Hathaway.
Professor?
Yes, go ahead. Yes. Are you going to question me on General Electric?
Hi, I have a question. No, I just had a question because you mentioned the banking company that if they decide to make shoelaces, it's not unitary because they're 2 separate companies and they're not related.
Right.
But you're saying that horizontally integrated businesses, that the vertically integrated businesses are unitary. But so what if the banking company owns the factory that makes the shoelaces? Like, what if they own the
Well, they do own the factory that makes the shoelaces, but I'm saying that those are 2 separate businesses that are separately run, that with different managements and different customers. If you have all of those things and you have a lack of intercompany transactions, there's no economies of scale. The shoelace company isn't doing any better because it's owned by the bank, unless maybe if we can show that the shoelace company is getting free money, is getting free financing from the bank, well, that might be a unitizing factor, right, between the 2. Maybe that does convert it into 1 pie instead of 2 pies, okay? Now, in Berkshire Hathaway or General Electric, you really do have Berkshire. I don't know if you know much about Berkshire Hathaway. That's Warren Buffett. Warren is always buying companies, right? Even though he's like 90 years old, he's still very active in the business. And he owns newspapers. He owns Dairy Queen. He owns so he owns that crummy ice cream, newspapers. He owns insurance companies. They have nothing to do with each other, right? He's a strategic buyer of businesses. And I have a feeling that pretty soon he's going to be in buy mode again pretty soon, right? If he starts seeing that the market becomes undervalued. So So, all right. So I think you see the
So
difference,
it's
right?
all
Between,
down to business purpose.
does it come down to business purpose? No, I don't think so. I think it comes down to, you can have all the intention in the world as long as it's the facts that you need, right? You may intend to run it as one single business, but it really comes down to the facts, right? Are they, is there, are the, I think the most important criteria is the economies of scale. If there are no economies of scale, then it's hard to imagine that you have a unitary business. Okay,
Okay, got it. Thank
with me? All right. All right, so we went through vertical integration, horizontal integration. Okay, now there's also this concept of asset unity. And that's the concept there is, so far we've been talking about businesses being unitary. There's also the concept of a particular asset being unitary. What that really comes down to is the Allied Signal case, right? Where if you remember the facts of that case, it wasn't actually Allied Signal. They had a subsidiary called Bendix, and then Bendix had another subsidiary called what was it? In Asarco, and Bendix sold Asarco, right? It was Bendix made auto parts. Asarco owned mines, like copper mines, and Bendix did business in New Jersey, and New Jersey was trying to, they made $1 billion gain when they sold the copper mines, and New Jersey wanted a piece of that gain. So the question was this particular asset unitary with Bendix? And the answer ends up being no. In this particular instance, they said Asarco was an independent investment, right? They weren't, the auto parts company wasn't doing anything with the copper and the gold and the silver mines. They said they bought a little bit to make auto parts, but it was like 1% of Asarco's production went to Bendix. So hardly very impressive, right? That was, and they were paying arm's length prices for it. So they weren't really getting any special benefit out of owning the company. So they end up concluding, Allied Signal, they owned it for several years. This was an independent investment. They did well on it, but it's a separate pie. And the pie of they have two pies. They have mining and they have auto parts. And only the auto parts part of the company touched New Jersey, right? So there was no business unity. But the question came out, was there asset unity? And what asset unity is all about is it really only plays out in one field, and that's short-term investments. So they say that if an asset serves a business function of the company, it can be unitary as well. So, and here's where it all boils down to the 1-year rule. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, that Bendix owned Asarco, or they didn't own 100% of Asarco. Let's say they owned 10% of Asarco, and they owned it for a couple of months, and then they sold it. Well, then that would have been asset unity because it was part of the working capital, right? Can't run a company without working capital, right? You need a ready supply of cash on hand to pay your employees and keep the place going, for you to pay people for what you need. So investments under a year are working capital, and that's considered to be fulfills the asset unity function. It's about the only good example of asset unity I can come up with, okay, is short-term working capital. So Allied Signal came forward with this 1-year rule such that if something is part of working capital, so if you buy some stock on a short-term basis, by short-term I mean less than a year, then it fulfills the asset unity. So it can be apportioned, it's part of the pie, but if it's owned for more than a year, it leaves the pie. Now it's an independent investment, okay? So at the end of the day, two things can be apportioned. Two things could be in a single pie: a unitary business or a unitary asset. And the only unitary asset I can think of is short-term securities that you might own. Okay, so if I, and this is going to come up on the exam, if we have short-term securities being sold, that's apportionable income. If it's long-term, then it's not part of the pie, okay? And it is typically taxed only by the domicile state, the commercial domicile state of the corporation. Okay? All right, so we went through asset unitary, the 1-year rule, and well, we've been discussing, I have here apportionality or apportionability, or portion, and that's what we've been talking about all along. If it's a unitary business, it's apportionable, the income from it. Okay, so let's assume now that we got that down. We know we have a unitary business. The next issue that comes up is fair apportionment. And we spent some time on this, but at the end of the day, I ended up concluding, you know what? There's not a whole lot to fair apportionment from a constitutional standpoint. And that's what we've been talking about, right? The first part of chapter, until we get to the UDIPTA statute, this is all constitutional stuff, right? The whole unitary principle is constitutional, has nothing to do with statutes. It's all common law. And so at least initially, courts looking at this would say, well, all right, so the first step is to figure out you have a unitary business. And then the second step is to look at the apportionment and decide if it was fair to the taxpayer. And early on, there were some cases where they found that as a matter of the Constitution, it was unfair. But then we sort of evolved, and that was sort of at the very beginning. They had instances where they had the apportionment was property only or payroll only, right? That was the only thing they considered. So the company it was the property in North Carolina versus the property everywhere, and that was the apportionment value. So there were 1 or 2 cases, and Hans Rees was the best example of that, where the company could prove that it made all of its money in New York, but because all of their property was in North Carolina ends up taxing like 100% of the income of the company. Whereas they had a lot of operations in New York as well, and it was just that they had a lot of people in New York, but not a lot of property. So it was found to be, as a matter of the constitutional law, it was found to be inappropriate, all right? But as time went on, people stopped using property only and stopped using payroll only. They developed the 3-factor formula of property, payroll, and sales. So and now I'm having trouble remembering. There was the case, the U.S. Supreme Court case, where all 3 factors were in play, and Justice Douglas says, that's okay. I understand that you can prove that you made, it was Butler Brothers, that's right. So I can understand you can prove, taxpayer, that you made all your money in Illinois and you made no money in California, but you know what? The 3-factor formula is inherently fair, and therefore we're not going to allow taxpayers to impeach the system, the accounting system of the company, to go in and say the accounting system is all messed up. We're not going to do that. If a 3-factor formula seems fair to us, it creates rough justice, and we're going to stick with that. And ever since Hans Rees was decided back in the 1920s, there never really was another case where on constitutional grounds it was found that apportionment was unfair. Now, of course, states are abandoning the 3-factor formula. They're going over to sales-only apportionment. So if property-only apportionment and payroll-only apportionment could lead to unfair results, why wouldn't 1-factor sales sales only apportionment lead to unfair results? And basically, no one has really provided an answer to this question except me. And I've come up with my own way of thinking about it. And I think it's unlikely, well, first of all, there's been a case on sales only and sales only apportionment, and it was found to be constitutional. That was Mooresman. The Mooresman case, which was in the book. And it was probably poorly conceived, but let's say the issue has been resolved, and the way I reconcile it in my own mind is that when you look at property, payroll, and sales, well, two of those are business inputs, and one of those is a business output, right? Sales, you're measuring the stuff leaving the company, whereas property and payroll are focused on costs of the company. And if you only consider one out of two costs, you have an unstable situation. But if you're only focused on the output and sales are your output, well, then I guess it can be fair because that's what the state has voluntarily come up with. So it would appear to me that if on constitutional grounds you're going to appeal a sales only formula, don't take that on contingency, you're going to lose that case. The only time from a constitutional standpoint that things will be found to be unconstitutional is if you have a payroll only or a payroll only formula, because you're only looking at some of the costs of the company, right? So it's possible to get an unfair apportionment scheme. Now, does that mean that that on a daily basis, we can't argue for alternative apportionment? Yes, you can. When we look at the UDIPTA statute, remember there's an unfairness provision in there. We do these things based upon state statutes. It's just so fairness is an important part of the UDIPTA system. It's just not part of the constitutional system. So the constitutional system is really basically unitary or not unitary. When can we apply apportionment? We're not going to get too many cases anymore where as a con law matter only, the apportionment is found to be defective. Okay. All right. So so moving on a little bit, we talked about individual domicile. We talked about it again tonight, right? It's the place where people think they're going to live out the rest of their lives. And then there's commercial domicile, right? And that's what we talked about mostly in chapter 7. Brain theory versus Braun theory. Most of the states follow brain theory. That means the company is domiciled in the state where the brains of the company are located. The C-suite, as we call them. That's the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, all the C's, the chief legal counsel. Those are the C's. And if they're all in one state, that's the domicile state. And for states subscribing to the brain theory, the Braun theory there's I think 5 states that follow that. That is, where does the company have most of its assets? So that's Braun theory. Dividends from a unitary business, that's another place where the unitary principle has importance, right? It has importance in how many pies that you have, but it also, another context where it comes up is when can you apportion dividends from a subsidiary? And it's basically, the answer to that question is if the subsidiary is unitary with you, then it's apportionable, right? Otherwise, it's not apportionable. The treatment of non-unitary income. So let's say something is not unitary. It's in a different pie. Well, then either that other pie is apportioned or certain categories of income, such as dividends and gains, will probably be directly allocated to the state of commercial domicile. And okay, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to cover in the first half of chapter 7. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, there are I counted them up. There are 12 questions on the unitary part. So that's a substantial part of the exam. So, know the chapter 7, that beginning of chapter 7. Now, after that, it gets easier. And chapter 7, the rest of chapter 7 is the UDIPTA statute. And all I can tell you is there's 12 questions on UDIPTA. And what I would do to study for that part is I would read the UDIPTA statute 3 or 4 times, especially the comments for it. This is not going to take you very long because the entire UDIPTA statute is only about 3 or 4 pages. So it's not, preparing for this part of the exam should be pretty simple. Read it, and then of course do the problems, right? That I provided. As a matter of fact, that's how you should study for the entire exam. Is don't start reading the cases in the book. That's going to take hundreds of hours. You're going to get, the most efficient way of studying is to go over my old questions and go over them a few times, feel comfortable with them, and I think you'll be in pretty good shape. So the UDIPTA statute, of course, isn't really a statute, it's a model statute, but I would say 40 of the states have copied it pretty closely, right? They don't always copy, it's just a suggested outline, they don't have to adopt every word of it. But most of the states have done it. And the one provision of it that I really think you should remember is the right to apportion. So a company, in order to apportion under UDIPTA, the company has to have a presence in more than one state. So if they don't have that, you can't apportion, and all of your income is going to be in that state. And you'll recall, I gave you an example where we sent one guy to another state. All of a sudden, magically, we could apportion, and before we couldn't. So that's a real trap for the unwary, and you guys are unwary. So you need to be wary of that rule, because I have a sneaking suspicion I'm being coy. I've already written the test. So when I say that I have a sneaking suspicion, it means I'm telling you it's going to be on there. So no, I think it's in section 2, I forget. Well, know the right to apportion. The business and non-business income, remember, like several sections are devoted to the treatment of non-business income. So that's directly allocated under various rules. Remember, they have one set of rules for rent, another set of rules for royalty, another set of rules for capital gains. I'm leaving something out, but those are the things that have to get. I think it's sections 5, 6, 7, 8 are the allocation statutes, right? And then you start moving into the apportionment part of it, right? And then everything else, everything that's business oriented gets apportioned, and the rest of the statute explains how to do how you calculate the payroll factor, how you calculate the property factor, how you allocate the sales factor. And there's a lot of nuance to all of those. We went over them in class. We went through the examples. On the sale, know the throwback rule for the on the sale of tangible property, right? That's if you're selling if you have a throwback rule and you're shipping to a state where you don't have presence, where you're not filing a tax return, then it gets, instead of being sourced to the state where you're shipping it to, it gets sourced to the state where you're shipping from. Know how domicile is defined under UDIPTA. They have their own definition of domicile. They follow the brain theory. Know the relief provisions, right? Well, I think that's the section 15. I forget. I think it's near the end. And that's basically our justification for always telling the state, no, you got to give us a special rule on apportionment. It's what you've got is unfair. And that's our friend, that section, right? It can also be our enemy, because the government can also employ a relief provision if it wants. Okay, so all right, so I think that's, know how services are sourced, right? Under UDIPTA, everything is sourced pursuant to the cluster performance rule. And that is becoming obsolete over the last couple of years, but because they haven't changed UDIPTA yet, we will stick with the cluster performance rule. That's in the law. Okay, it's in the UDIPTA law. And then, okay, so the last 2 weeks we did sales taxes. Let's move on to that. And here I'm very detailed on sales taxes. Know those definitions at the beginning. Remember, a sale is a transfer of title or possession. So in other words, it doesn't have to be an outright sale. It could be a lease of the property. That will count. Know the definition for a retail sale. Remember, that's at the anytime you're buying to resell it to somebody else, that's not a retail sale. That's a sale for resale. That is not taxed. The sales tax is only imposed on the last leg when the ultimate consumer is acquiring the property. Know the definition of tangible personal property, right? That is any property that you can stub your toe on. That's the classic definition. It's any property that is perceptible to the senses. In other words, you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can hear it. If you can do any of those, if it's perceptible to your senses, then it's tangible personal property. If you have ESP, extrasensory perception, that doesn't count, right? If you just, never mind, I'm sorry I brought that up. Okay, so the use tax is the kissing cousin of the sales tax. The use tax applies when you buy property from out of state and they didn't charge you a sales tax. You are supposed to self-assess a use tax. You do that once a year. When you file your income tax return, they will ask you, did you buy any property that they didn't charge you a sales tax on? And you're supposed to record that on your tax return. Few people do, but companies must do that. They get audited on that very regularly. Sales of tangible personal property are taxed unless there's an exception. And of course, there's many exceptions, like real property isn't taxed. The purchase of real property, you buy a house, you don't pay tax, right? It's not personal property, it's real property. You buy food from the supermarket, that's typically exempt. You pay someone a salary, that is exempt. It's only a sale on the purchase of tangible personal property. So all tangible personal property is taxed unless there's an exception. Services, on the other hand, are not taxable unless there's a specific rule taxing it. So services only apply to a few enumerated services. And there are some oddball services type inclusions, like I know gardening is often a service that's taxed, and using databases is often, that's a taxable service. But all right, so but there's a limited, we didn't really spend a lot of time on services. All right. Now, a big part of know the tests for, remember often the sale of property is sort of intermingled with a service, and we have different ways, different courts have analyzed that problem in different ways, and I wanted you to know for sure 3 of those rules, and we went over them. They're in our notes. The common understanding test, I'm going to do them backwards. The common understanding test is basically, what would the jury think this was, right? Would the fact finder think that this was something, was it a service or was it proper? How would the average person think of this particular transaction? Then, on the other hand, in California, they have the physical usefulness test that virtually everything is taxable anytime you have a service mixed up with property, such as the ultimate example in California is somebody spent $10 million for a patent. A patent is kind of your classic intangible, right? Except that in California, it was, they bought the blueprints. It was actually sitting there on the blueprints. And California said, well, the blueprints are tangible personal property and they're useful, and therefore we're going to tax the transaction. Whereas the states following the common understanding test, they would say, hey, jury, what do you think they were acquiring here? Were they acquiring the blueprints or were they acquiring the patent? And I think most juries would say they were acquiring the patent. So so you get one result in California and you get a different result everywhere else. Now, the true value test was analyzed to death in the book, and I don't think anybody really follows it anymore. But remember, the true value was, it was trying to get inside the heads of the mental state of the person. Like, what were they trying to acquire? And it's a circular type of thing. It doesn't read, it's not predictive, as Hellerstein says. It's not predictive of anything, because if you get into 20 different people do a transaction, if you have to get into each person's head, you're going to come up with 20 different answers, and it's not, it doesn't give any predictability to anybody else out there as to what's going to be. So actually, really, no, so to be familiar with all three, okay? California physical usefulness, the true value, and the common understanding test. All right. Hey, what did I left out mixed. I left out mixed transactions. Remember, bundle transactions are bad, right? If you buy a taxable item with a non-taxable item, and the invoice doesn't designate like which is which, the entire thing becomes taxable. If, on the other hand, you have an itemized bill, you have a mixed transaction, then only the taxable item is taxed. And you will recall, it gets a little bit more complicated than that when recall that someone was selling computers with a warranty contract, and if they were sort of smushed together that you had to buy one, you couldn't buy one without buying the other, then that was a bundled or tax transaction. But if there was a way of sort of breaking the two out where, hey, let's say they were sold a la carte, where you could buy them separately, and there was a pricing structure for buying them separately, well, in that instance, that was a mixed transaction, and only the taxable part was taxed. So no, mixed is good, bundled is bad, and we went over that to death in class. All right. I don't know why I put repair services here, but repair services are taxable. Okay. Leases of tangible personal property are a retail sale, right? So that's just as taxable as a purchase of an item. If you have a sale leaseback of an item, you might want to examine it to see if the real underlying substance is one of a loan. If that's the case, if something is really a loan and not a sale, then that may escape taxation. Here, I want you to know these tests. Again, don't have to memorize anything. All you need to have is these notes here in front of you. But remember, there's a major exception for materials that are used in manufacturing. But then there's different nuanced approaches to that. So the principal purpose test, the substantial component test, the necessary ingredient test, the split the baby test, and the economic consumption test. We went over that very thoroughly. That's going to come up on the exam. Be familiar with again, no memorization required, just be familiar with these tests. Machinery and equipment. Remember, machines are typically exempt from taxation. A machine is defined as something that changes the physical character of something. So it bends it, smelts it, breaks it apart, puts it, reassembles it. If it does any of those things, it's a machine. But where things get a little more complicated is if, let's say you have an automated plant and you have a computer that's running the machine. Is the computer part of the tax, because the computer is running the manufacturing machine? Does the computer become exempt? And that's where you have to know, if the plant adopts the integrated plant doctrine, then the computer from the manufacturer, you look at everything that's going on in the factory from start to finish is exempt under the integrated plant doctrine. But if a state doesn't have that, then you look to see if each machine in the process is a manufacturing machine. And also be familiar with the adaptation of materials test. We had a question devoted to that, so know that. All right. And then a couple of other little topics. Real estate transfers are always exempt. Remember, there was that one exception for the modular homes. Know the different rules on coupons and discounts. Remember, a store coupon always reduces the tax, but not a manufacturer's coupon. So know that. Know the events implicating the use tax, and I think the key thing is not only the use is broadly defined to include storage. So if I trick you that someone bought something but just put it in the drawer, not needing it for a couple of years, well, he's already incurred the use tax because storage is a use. So it sort of doesn't really fit within the normal definition of the word use, but use has a special definition under the sales and use tax statutes. This is going to come up, the liability of the officers and the shareholders. Now remember, sales tax is a trust fund tax. You're going to get into a lot of trouble if you collect it and don't remit it. Trouble will occur, and the officers of the company, if the company goes bankrupt, the officers of the company may be held liable for any unpaid trust fund taxes. And sometimes the shareholders will be responsible as well. Now, what is our point of differentiation? If it's a closely held company, the shareholders may be held responsible. They will so-called pierce the veil and hold those guys responsible as well. But if it's IBM, a big company, publicly held, don't worry, you can go buy shares in a company without being subject to any fraudulent acts committed by that company. All right. So piercing the veil only really occurs in closely held situations. Be familiar with occasional or isolated sales. It's just two ways of saying the same thing. Remember, if you have a garage sale on your driveway, that is probably going to fit within most states' definition of an occasional sale. You don't have responsibilities for collecting the tax. However, occasional sales also apply sometimes to a company selling all of its assets. And maybe in that instance, maybe you can somehow fit within the occasional sales rule that the state has. So that's another incident. So if it's non-inventory, you want to consider whether or not there's an occasional sales rule that exempts your transfer of otherwise taxable property. Then we looked at auto trade-ins. Remember, if you and I we're not dealers in cars, we just trade cars. Well, and each car was worth $5,000. Well, we each owe sales tax on $5,000, right? It's going to be a doubly taxed event. However, when you trade in a car, the trade-in value of your car is a reduction in the sales price, right, of the car. And of course, the dealer doesn't pay tax because he's acquiring the car to resell it to somebody else. So he doesn't pay tax on his acquisition of your used car, and you get a reduction. So if a car is $25,000 and you give it as a trade-in a car that they give you $10,000 of trade-in value on, now you're only paying $15,000 cash, and they give you only pay sales tax on $15,000. This is a stupid rule. It shouldn't be there, but I guess the dealers fought for it and they got it. Okay. And that's it. I think I've gone through the major. I don't hold, if I left something out, don't hold me accountable and say, no, you can't count that question because it wasn't on the review sheet. I think we have about 90% coverage here. My basic rule of thumb will be, if we spend time discussing it in class, if it's in my Q&A, then I feel I have a clear conscience that you've had warning about it and you need to know it. If it's not in my Q&A, you don't need to know it. Okay, that's why going over the Q&A is such a valuable way of studying. Okay, so so that's kind of it. I guess I'll just sort of throw it open to questions at this point. So anybody got a question? Anything we should want to talk about? Anything on your mind? If you can't think of it right now, if it comes to you, you have my phone number, give me a call. You have my email, send me an email. If I don't get back to you quickly, do it again. I'm here to help, and we'll get through this. Okay. So any questions for right now?
Professor,
Yeah.
what is adaptation material text?
What? Say it again.
Adaptation material text is on your
Material.
adaptation of materials text. Okay, I would have
In materials used in definition of material. You mean the materials used in manufacturing?
adaptation of materials text.
Under machinery and equipment, the third bulletin would be adaptation.
Oh, adaptation of materials. Oh, okay, I'm with you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that's a good question. So in some states they have, so let's go through the key definition for manufacturing is a machine that does something. You know, it changes, it breaks things apart or puts them together, or it changes the material. So like, let's say you're working with wood, the machine that smashes up the wood, that's tax-free, right? And the machine that bolts the wood together, that's tax-free, right? Because it's doing something to the wood. Now, let's say at the end of the process, you're polishing the wood, okay? Well, that's not really changing the appearance of the wood, is it? Well, I guess it's making it brighter, but it's not changing the physical form of the wood. So normally, the polishing machine would be subject to tax when you buy the polishing machine, except in states that have the adaptation of materials test. And I think probably the only good example I can think of that is like a polishing machine. So that's not smashing the wood up or, you know, reconnecting it or building it, or it's just adapting it somehow. So those
What
states.
about like a packaging machine?
A packaging machine, I would say, is not manufacturing because it's not changing the form of anything, right?
Right. So taxed, right?
Yeah, so I would say that's tax.
Yeah.
There's no way that's going to fit in to the normal machinery. I mean, the point here is that not all machinery is exempt from tax, right? So, but you have there, I guess there's these two theories. The machines that, like I said, change the form of materials. Here, let me give you a good example. This one will blow your mind. You're in a supermarket, and they have, you know how they have those slicing machines, you know, like where they're slicing up the ham or they're slicing up the salami. That would be exempt because what is it doing? It's cutting up the meat, right? So it's changing the form of something, right? It's cutting up the salami. So that's actually a machine. That's exempt, but the adaptation of materials is sort of like an expansion of the exempt machinery. So it's getting something ready for manufacturing, or at the end of the manufacturing process, it's polishing it, or it's not altering the form of the raw material. It's sort of polishing the raw material, or, you know, or getting it ready, right? So to go back to the example of the packaging machine, so I'm picturing a machine that at the end of the process puts everything in a box. So I would say, if that's what you were imagining, I would say there's no way that that's exempt because it's not involved in manufacturing. And I think I gave the example, like, so let's say you have forklifts bringing the stuff in from the loading dock and putting it to machine number one. That forklift is going to be taxable because it's not part of the manufacturing process. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? Don't be shy. All right. Well, it's 5 after 9, so go do something fun, or study for your partnership exam. I'm sorry? Spend some time on this one too, okay? So this would be a good opportunity for me to say how much I enjoyed having each of you in the class. It was really, well, I would say most semesters, let's not kid ourselves, this was not as fun as other semesters, but I don't think anybody's enjoying this whole Zoom experience all that much, but or the crazy environment that we're in. But I'll tell you, I give you guys a lot of credit for sticking with it. And I know day-to-day life must be trying for a lot of you. It's not so bad for me. I'm here with my family, and while we fight a little bit just to make things interesting from time to time, whose turn it is to clean out the dishwasher seems to be an unending source of conflict, sort of probably equivalent to the Israeli-Palestinian experience. But but for the most part, it's quite pleasant having everybody around. And you know, for those of you on your own, I feel and worried about families and worried about, you know, far from home. I feel for you, and I give you a lot of credit that you're sticking, you know, you're sticking with things. Maybe it bears repeating, you know, how the grading is going to work. I think I told you several times that they changed the grading scale to allow for a lot more A's and B's, and then if, you know, for some reason you don't like your grade, you have the absolute option this semester, and I think for the summer semester as well, to go to pass fail. And I'm not quite sure how that works, but don't dawdle on that. If you decide to take the pass fail option, I think there's only a limited number of days to do it, so do it quickly, okay? Otherwise, you're gonna let the opportunity pass you by. But I'm sure you've all been informed on that. I sure hope you have. Anything else? And like I said, call. I'm not, you know, I don't mind. I enjoy the calls.
Hi, Professor, I was wondering if you have graded the additional question that you suggest.
I did. I gave them all back, but I didn't do group 3. Oh, no, wait, I forget what. Yeah, group 1 were the people who didn't take the midterm. Those people got their papers back, their grades. Then there was group 2 who got below a certain grade. And then everybody else was group 3. And I was only going to look at those if you were like on the bubble between an A- and an A, and ooh, what should this be? So then I was going to look at it. So Catherine, if you were in group 3, I didn't look at it yet, and I may never. Okay.
Okay, Professor, thank you.
Okay. But if you were in groups 1 or 2 and I didn't give you your grade back, then let me know, and I'll do it now. Anybody else? Do I teach another? Someone just asking. Philip with 2 L's. Do I teach another class at Baruch? I used to teach the introductory federal class, and that was fun. And then I don't know, I just rotated into just doing the state and local class. They keep asking me to do other classes, and yeah, and well, in the Baruch fashion, you know, when they ask me, they'll ask me a class I've never done before, and then they'll ask me like 3 days before the semester is beginning, you know, like where you can't really get prepared in time. That's the way Baruch typically functions. As a matter of fact, you know how I always find out each year that they want me to do the state and local class. I see my name listed in the catalog for the spring. That's how they assume a lot. Now, I am planning on retiring next June. So not this June, but you know, June of 21. I'll be well into my 65th year at that point. So it seems like probably a good time. I may stay on a part-time basis, or I may start teaching more at Baruch. So I have to decide what I want to do. So I actually may do more than one class in the future. So that was my long wind. That was probably a lot more information than you wanted to know. So I guess you like the class. So if you want me to, or you just want to know, is there another class that you have to avoid in the future? So Well, thank you all. So again, I really think I think you're all heroes in your own way for sticking with this. And before I start crying, let's I'll bid you good night. So
Before you do, there
Oh.
were some professors that failed, just so you know, not necessarily in the tax program. And then there was, we do appreciate it. There was one professor I had to stay with because he just didn't want to get involved with the Zoom or anything.
Yeah.
I had to handhold him every single day of the term.
Well, the only reason you didn't do that for me was my oldest daughter Anna is like a whiz at this stuff. So except that today she abandoned me. That's why I had to let everybody in one by one, because I didn't know the command to let everybody in. But yeah, she went to go be with her boyfriend. Imagine that, she abandons me for that. So yeah, so but anyway, she's been a big help, and so but for her, you probably would have been in here helping me,
I doubt it.
I'm like so technophobic that that I had to fill out a questionnaire today. I could see what the wave of the future is at work. I had to explain what is my degree of comfort with various programs, like various commercial programs. I hadn't even heard of most of them. Do you use mumbo jumbo, on a daily basis? No. And I had to like fill out this long, every single one. No. So basically, upper management think I'm a moron, that I don't know any of this stuff. So it's not easy, it's but I did sort of master how to do the recordings, and I set up a YouTube page on my own. I know I sound like childish that I was actually feel proud of myself that I did all these things. But so it's been, so I guess I learned some I learned useful things from you guys. All right. Well, anyway, there must be something you all want to go watch on TV. So goodbye. For those of you who came late, you got to check out the beginning of the recording. I went into some depth on the exam, and I want you to know that stuff. Okay. So please. Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you,
Good
Professor.
night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so
Bye.
much.
Oh, that was so cute.